Story 1. The Shadow That Took My Dad. Chiricahua Mountains, Arizona. 2018. In 2018, in Arizona's Chiricahua Mountains, a heavy thud behind my parents startled me. My mom's scream, sharp as a breaking branch, pierced the air. I spun around, my flashlight beam flickering, just in time to see a sleek, dark shadow dragging my dad uphill. It left a trail of torn boot prints that vanished as if the mountain had swallowed him whole. My name is Cal Mason, and this terrifying event happened to my family and me. We, including my dad, younger sister Jules, and Uncle Rico, had started our hike at dawn, following a crest trail toward unique rhyolite pinnacles called the Organ Pipes. It was a normal trip, with Dad teasing me about my 2 knives and me teasing him about his instant coffee. The first unusual thing was the overwhelming silence. No cicadas, no JS, just the soft crunch of our boots. Then, we discovered a meticulously cleaned mule deer carcass, its rib bones arranged like steaks in the sand. Uncle Rico dismissed it as cat scraps, but noted, "This looks arranged." Dad shrugged it off, but Jules instinctively held my hand. By mid-morning, we found a dry creek bed where every 5th white quartz stone was turned upside down, revealing its orange side, like a strange code. 20 minutes later, we stopped for lunch in a shaded alcove. While my mum cut apples, I wandered behind a boulder to relieve myself and saw deep, vertical gouges on the rock wall for together, longer than my forearm, to clean for natural erosion, and too high for any animal I knew. At their base lay Dad's tiny lightning bolt earring, which he swore he'd lost at home. When I showed it to him, his smile vanished. We continued, aiming to camp at Big Balanced Rock before sunset. The trail wound through narrow canyons, revealing red and gray striped rock towers. Around 3 p.m., Rico pointed out a juniper trunk, stripped of bark 9 feet up, with a slick metallic smear where sap should have been. He dabbed it, sniffed, and muttered, "Metal, smells like pennies." No one responded. We reached the campsite by 4 p.m. Balanced rock loomed like a giant's head on a skinny neck. Dad called it famous. Jules said it looked ready to fall on us. I set up the tents, Mom filtered water, and Rico dug a fire pit. As daylight faded, the silence grew so thick it seemed to erase even the distant highway. Then came the thud behind Dad, and the scream that tore everything apart. I bolted uphill, yelling his name, the loose grease sliding under my boots. I lost him in 20 seconds, finding only the torn bootprint trail ending at a slot too narrow for a man, yet bearing a faint copper scent. Mom shouted for me. I shouted for Dad. No answer. We regrouped at camp. Dad's pack lay open, its straps cleanly sliced. His headlamp dangled 15 feet up from a branch, its lens cracked inward. Jules cried. Mum zipped the tent, told Jules to stay inside, then grabbed the bear spray, useless, but it steadied her hands. Rico and I circled the perimeter. No footprints, no sap tracks, just windless air and looming rock columns. We heard a sharp snap, like a rifle. A tall, strangely jointed shape flicked between 2 rocks, moving with deliberate patience. My flashlight beam caught a glimpse, skin-mottled charcoal and sand, coarse hair on its shoulders, a neck bent sideways before rising, a smooth, narrow head with no visible ears, and a mouth like a seam. It paused, turned its thin head, and 2 matte eyes met the light, absorbing it rather than reflecting. I yelled. It stepped back, its hips swiveling, knees bending in the opposite direction from mine. 1 stride, and it was gone. Rico whispered, "Not a cat." An understatement, I thought. We sprinted back to camp. Mum pushed Jules toward me. "We hike out now," she said. Night had already swallowed the peaks, but staying still felt worse. We strapped on headlamps, shoulders brushing together, and started downhill. Half a mile later, all 3 headlamps flickered simultaneously and died. Total darkness. Something whistled through the air. Rico gasped. When the beams spotted back, his pack was gone, its shoulder straps cleanly sliced, yet still dangling from his shoulders. He cursed in Spanish and ran. The darkness answered with a wet crack. Rico's body jerked forward, pulled by an unseen line, then vanished into the rocks. His scream cut off mid. We never saw him again. Mum yanked Jules and me behind a fallen tree trunk. "We hold here till dawn," she said. My heart pounded. Jules sobbed quietly, repeating Dad's name. I gripped both knives, trying to breathe silently. Minutes dragged. Pebbles shifted beyond the trunk, soft, measured. I raised my blade, ready to slash, knowing it wouldn't matter. A hand brushed my shoulder. Mums. She kissed my hair and whispered, "If it takes me to run." Before I could reply, the trunk lifted, not rolled, but lifted as if weightless. Heel silhouettes framed the creature, holding it absurdly long arms, elbows higher than my head, fingers slender as tent stakes, tipped with chipped obsidian nails. It tossed the log aside like foam. Mum stepped in front of us and sprayed the can. A hiss filled the air, orange mist lit by moonlight. The shape reeked. Its mouth seemed parted, revealing a ring of flat gray plates grinding like gears. Soundlessly, it swatted the can, metal clanging on stone. Mum swung the trekking pole, sending sparks flying. Jules screamed. I grabbed her arm and ran downhill. Feet pounded behind us. Maybe Mum's, maybe not. Jules tripped. I hauled her up. A sharp pop cut through the dark. I smelled the penny scent again. Stronger. Jules's weight sagged. Warm wetness spread across my side. I dragged her until we reached a cluster of hoodoos forming a hollow. I propped her against a rock. My lamp showed a deep, clean wound, no torn fabric. She looked at me, lips trembling. "I'm tired," she whispered. Her eyes glazed, breath shallow. A minute later, she slumped. I left my little sister in that stone cradle because I had no choice. Footsteps approached, a slow, unhurried crunch of grit under something heavier than feet. I squeezed between two spires, scraping my shoulders raw, and climbed into a chimney of stone. 30 feet up, an old firewatch platform, rusted into the cliff, offered refuge. I pulled myself over the rail and collapsed. The platform held a dented propane canister left by some hiker who hated carrying trash out. I unscrewed the nozzle, stuffed my bandana into the valve, and waited with a lighter. Below, the shape paced, the base, tracing my path with uncanny certainty. It craned its neck upward, those matte eyes drinking the moon. I lit the fuse, blue flames sputtering on cloth. I stood, shouted every curse I knew. It glided closer, arms spreading. When it reached the wall, I hurled the can. Gravity did the rest. Metal struck rock, burst, and a fireball whooshed, painting the hoodoo's gold. The creature staggered, its hide smoking, plates clacking faster. It clawed at the cliff, but lost its grip and fell backward into darkness. The light died. Silence settled, thicker than before. I stayed till dawn, muscles locked. At first light, I climbed down, knees shaking, and followed the trailhead markers 7 miles to the ranger station. They called in teams, choppers, dogs. Searchers found Dad's boot, Rico's cap, Mom's pole, Jules's bracelet. No remains, no prints, only smears of that coppery residue on high ledges no man could reach. They questioned me for hours, then let me go. I drove home wearing the same dust-coated boots. The left toe is still stained a faint turquoise from that blasted rock, and some nights I find myself staring at it, wondering how stone dust can survive so many workings. Asheness. Story 2, Fire Lookout, Under Siege, Killer National Forest, New Mexico, 2017. In 2017, in the Gila National Forest of New Mexico, my radio crackled with a stranger's voice telling me to log a fire I couldn't see. Before I could respond, a rifle shot shattered the cabin window, chewing into the map board inches from my head, signaling sudden conflict. My name is Caleb Mercer. I was pulling a double shift at Bear Wallow Lookout because of thin budgets, and September was still scorching the grass like tinder. Dawn passed uneventfully. I drank my percolator coffee, reported the morning codes, and walked the catwalk, counting distant ridges as other men might count rosary beads. At 10:30, the relief tech arrived, Donna Sosa, an ex-park ranger with quick jokes and a limp from an old climbing fall. She unpacked her lunch, eyed the spider-webbed window, and whistled someone target practicing at the wrong cabin. "First shot of the day," I said, forcing a grin. I swept the glittering shards off the desk, logged the damage, and assumed it was just a clumsy hunter dart. Then the second call came. A low, flat male voice ordered me to record a column of smoke north of Willow Draw, coordinates that didn't match anything on the ridge map. He spoke like he was reading a grocery list, and then ended the transmission. Dana looked at me. "Prank. Let's check it." I grabbed binoculars. She slung the shotgun across her shoulder. We scanned every direction, no plume. Dispatch confirmed no other lookout had reported anything. Procedure dictated we stay put, but instinct urged us to find the liar. By noon, the sun hung overhead like an interrogation lamp. We packed bear spray, sidearms and a flare gun into our day packs, locked the tower, and hiked the switchback trail toward Willow Draw. The high desert smelled of juniper and warm dust. Dana filled the silence with trivia about lightning strike patterns, a subject she'd written her thesis on. It felt like any other field day until we found the first footprint at the draw, a deep lug sole stamped on fresh ash. Someone had burned a single creosote bush and tamped the embers with a boot. Dana crouched, touched the gray flakes. "Someone's planting ghost fires," she muttered. "False alarms keep crews busy elsewhere," I frowned. Why would the crack of a rifle cut off my thought? Bark exploded over Dana's head. We dropped behind a boulder. Another shot whizzed past and buried itself in the soil. I peeked around the rock and saw two men 50 yards out, climbing the slope in a staggered advance. They moved with drilled precision. Short bursts, reposition, short bursts. Both wore dusty canvas, orange foam earplugs, and cheap ski masks pushed above their brows. One carried a scoped .308, the other an AR with taped magazines. "Forest Service," I yelled. "Lower your weapons." The only answer was a bullet that ricocheted off the boulder, ringing in my ears. Dana cursed, raised the shotgun, and pumped a warning round in their direction. The shot scattered pebbles. The gunman ducked but kept coming. I was already calculating terrain, no cover uphill, a ravine to the west, the tower a mile back. My mental map said, run south to the old mining trail and circle behind them. I grabbed Dana's sleeve. 2 minutes of fire, then we sprint left. We exchanged rounds. My pistol cracked dryly in the open heat. Her shotgun boomed. The men slowed but didn't retreat. When Dana's third shell clicked on an empty chamber, we bolted downslope, sliding on loose shale. Bullets stitched dust at our heels. The mining trail cut across a limestone face and ducked into pin and scrub. We dove through the brush and bellied under a fallen juniper, hearts pounding. My hands shook enough to rattle the compass clipped to my belt. Dana's breath hitched. "Why us, Caleb?" "No hikers parked at the trailhead today," I answered. "Whoever they are, they wanted rangers." Past the scrub, the earth opened into an abandoned prospect pit. Corrugated steel panels leaned against the walls, and inside sat a white propane tank, 20 sacks of nitrate fertilizer, and coils of detonator cord snaking across the dust. It smelled of diesel and sharp chemicals. Dana's eyes widened. "They're building a bomb big enough to napalm half the forest," she said. I spotted a topo map tacked to a board, circles drawn around the lookout towers, mine, Eagle Peak, Mogollon, Baldy. They plan to erase our vantage points, blind the service, then ignite the canyon winds. Wildfire as camouflage or protests. Either way, it's murder. Footsteps scuffed above. The gunman had tracked us. We ducked behind the propane tank. I whispered, "If they hit this, we're vapor." Dana nodded toward a narrow ventilation shaft at the far end of the pit, half hidden by We crawled for it. A shot rang out, punching the dirt inches away. I shoved Dana forward. She slid into the shaft. Before I could follow, a hand gripped my collar and yanked me back. I slammed into the gunman with the scope. His mask was gone now, a pockmarked face, gray stubble, ice blue eyes, flat as pond ice. He drove the rifle butt into my stomach, knocking the air out, then aimed the muzzle at my head. A raw, and close. Dana's shotgun, reloaded somehow, fired point blank. The man's torso jerked. He fell sideways. The second attacker fired a burst that hammered Dana off her feet. The shaft echoed with her gasp. Red spread across her ranger green shirt. I dragged her into the tunnel as rounds clanged off steel. The shaft was black, cramped, and dropped into old mine workings. Dana's blood slicked my hands. She blinked, tried to smile. "Finish school for me," she whispered her stupid running joke because I never finished my forestry degree. Then her eyes unfocused. I cinched her field bandage anyway, rage tightening each knot, and checked my gear. One flare remained, plus the bear spray. From above, gravel trickled. He was coming down the shaft. The mine tunneled right and left. Right smelled of rot. Left felt cooler with a draft, suggesting an exit. I left Dana's pack as bait, crept right, then doubled back left in a crouch. The attacker dropped into the dark, sweeping a flashlight. He wore a red handkerchief over his face and a coiled snake tattoo on his neck. I popped the bear spray at his beam. Orange fog blasted his eyes. He cursed, fired blindly. I tackled him. The pistol skidded away. We rolled in the dirt, fists wild. He was heavier, but panic gave me teeth. I clawed for the flare gun on my belt, jammed the muzzle under his chin and pulled the trigger. The flare erupted, punched through soft tissue, and pinned him to the roof in a spray of sparks. Fire lit the mine like a furnace. I scrambled off him, snagged his AR and ran deeper, heat licking my back. The mine timbers caught. Creosote smoke curled in sheets. I found a ladder shaft wedged with roots and climbed until daylight stabbed my eyes. I crawled into the open air on a ridge half a mile east of the tower. Behind me, a plume finally rose where the pit vented flame. It would burn hot but localized. Rocks and gravel starved the spread. Radios crackled across channels. Now, lookout crews were calling in my column. I took the handset clipped to the AR sling. Basis is bare. Armed arsonists neutralized near Willow Draw. One officer down. Fire contained. Send medevac. My voice sounded like someone else's. I limped back to Dana. Smoke floated from the shaft like a signal of surrender. I carried her to flat ground, laid her under juniper shade, and waited. Helicopter rotors eventually thumped the sky. They found me sitting beside the pack she'd left me, finishing the water she never would. When the medics zipped her into the bright yellow bag, I handed them her notebook of lightning trivia so she could keep teaching someone. The wind turned, lifting sparks toward the empty sky. I watched until the crew chief touched my shoulder and told me it was time to go, and I realized daylight had never looked so thin. You can also find this story on room 13.*story 3 in 2019. Deep in the Monongahela National Forest of West Virginia, dead radios, scattered footprints running in circles, and Sergeant Wade screaming into the tree line were all we had when the sun dipped behind the ridge. 10 minutes later, only the echo of automatic fire answered my frantic calls that night. My name is Captain Elias Grant, and this is what happened. We deployed at First Light, 6 of us, and a pallet of gear tasked with locating a vanished civilian genetics team, which the agency insisted was purely scientific. Rosy dawn caught on the treetops as rotors whipped fog across the LZ, but the air already felt wrong. Birdsong was absent, and there was no wind in the pines. It was as if the forest held its breath. Wade cracked a joke about horror movies. No one laughed. By 0800, we reached the researcher's cabin. The door hung off one hinge, its bolt ripped straight through the oak. Inside, laptops smoldered, their screens punched out, and blood splattered across charts of chromosome maps. Doc Hanley squatted, whispering, "Human, AB type, still tacky." On the floor lay prints unlike anything I'd tracked in Afghanistan, human-sized heel, but the forefoot split into 3 thick pads, each ending in a gouge deep enough to shave wood. We followed that trail south toward an abandoned limestone mine. Morales kept sweeping his M4, muttering Spanish prayers between breaths. At 10:43, Wade's radio spat static, then a single squeal so high it rattled my fillings. Headsets blew and died. Comms were gone in a blink. The shaft mouth yawned beneath dead vines. Someone had welded steel doors across it years ago. Those doors now bulged outward like balloon metal, hinges twisted, fresh red streaks dragged inward. We set white chem lights every 5 meters. Inside, the passage sloped, hot and wet, sulfur heavy enough to sting eyes. 30 meters down, we found Mills, stripped of his vest and helmet, throat opened ear to ear, yet with hardly any blood, as if pressure had been vacuumed from his body. Next to him lay a voice recorder. I thumbed play. A woman gasped. We thought it needed calcium. It needed us. Double quotes, then tearing, then a sound like a stone mill grinding meat, then silence. Sing spotted motion on the ceiling. A pale shape unfolded from the rock, skin the color of grave wax stretched over lean muscle. Backward hinged legs clamped the roof. Arms hung low, 3 hooked claws on each hand. Its head angled too far to one side, its jaw hinge traveling halfway up the cheek. Its eyes were black pits that didn't reflect light. They drank it. I fired a 3-round burst into center mass. The thing snapped sideways, clambered behind struts, and vanished deeper with a chitter that shook screws from overhead beams. Asterisk. We dragged Mills out and rigged a pair of claymores at the mouth. Torres thumbed the clacker. Both mines flashed, but nothing screamed. Only dust rolled out, carrying the smell of hot copper. High ground felt wiser, so we pushed to an old fire tower overlooking the valley. Along the way, the prince fanned out. Now two distinct sets, one smaller. It wasn't alone. At 1300, we reached the tower. Steel stairs groaned under our gear and nerves. Wade and I climbed to the cabin while the others formed an outward ring. From that perch, I surveyed the entire forest, a dark quilt broken by limestone cuts and logging roads. Somewhere out there, something had turned a team of PhDs into bait. Torres called up, "Cap." The prince doubled back fast. Leaves rustled, then rifles hammered. I raced down. Torres and Morales poured lead into a blur streaking between trunks. Bullets chipped bark yet slowed nothing. The blur vaulted, took Morales by the neck, mid-stride, and flung him against a stump with such force his spine punched through Kevlar. Wade's saw barked. The blur collapsed in a heap of twitching limbs. Up close, it stank of wet slate and ammonia. Its chest fluttered, bone plates trying to knit around bullet holes. We burned it, gasoline, thermite, the works. Flesh puckered and cracked, but the carcass didn't thrash, as though its nerves were wired off. Singh knelt, snapped photos, lifted a jaw with a stick. The inner mouth revealed a second set of hinged plates, like a snake packed wrong. Gene Mods, Hanley said. The research contract was DARPA Black. They spliced osteopetrotic bat genes for sonic mapping, silverback muscle density, and God knows what else. Looks like the volunteer opted out. I radioed for exfil even though I knew no answer would come. The sky stayed silent. We still had one thing moving out there, the smaller print trail. Orders were dead researchers. Evidence secured. Threat contained. Containment meant kill. We loaded up and followed it. Dusk bled across ridgelines when we entered a defunct strip mine. Terraced shelves descending to a pool the color of spoiled ink. Torres took point. Wade took the rear. Halfway down, gravel shifted behind us. The smaller shape vaulted from a culvert and rammed Wade over the edge. He disappeared into brush 2 levels down. I sprinted after him, catching sight of the thing crouched on Wade's chest. Not a kid version, but full-sized, thinner ribs showing, pupils burning like deep coal. It hammered talons through Wade's plate, punctured a lung, and yanked something red and shining. Wade's sidearm still sat holstered. His eyes met mine, already glazing, but he shoved a grenade spoon against the thing's thigh and jerked the pin with his thumb. The blast rocked the shelf. Dirt rained. When the smoke cleared, only scraps of Wade and shredded gray tissue remained. Grief later, mission now. Torres, Singh, Hanley, and I circled the crater. The shape wasn't moving, but I had learned. We riddled it until our rifles clicked empty. Hanley stepped forward and drove a titanium pry bar through its skull base for good measure. Torres looked skyward and spat. 2 targets, both down. Let's call the bird. But our sat beacon screen glowed blank white. Scrambled, the valley poured night like ink into the mine. I set thermite on both cadavers. Flames rose green and blue, chemicals in their marrow cooking off. Then we heard sonar clicks, faint, everywhere at once, echoing off limestone walls. Third one. Singh breathed. A ripple raced across the black water below. Something moved beneath the surface, leaving no wake, only a widening silence. Flashbangs. I ordered. 3 grenades arced and burst white. The pool erupted. Out surged the largest form yet, twice my height. Muscles coiled under stretched gray skin, webbed with scars. No eyes this time. Instead, a shield of calloused bone across its face, drilled with pinholes that winked in the light. It landed on the lowest shelf, water sloughing off, and started up toward us, hand over fist with terrifying calm, ripping embedded rebar as we fell back, firing rounds, pancaking against that bony mask. Singh had 1 Carl G heat round left. He knelt, sighted, whispered for Wade, and fired. The rocket punched the mask, blowing off half its head. The brute kept climbing, skull smoking, bone fragments ticking down the slope. Climb the tower, I said. It chases me. You light the satchel. I sprinted. It followed a silent locomotive of meat and bone-smashing saplings. My heart hammered, but my legs remembered Ranger School hills. I led it to the fire tower base where, Torres had already strung 2 bricks of C4 under the staircase with a detonator cord tail. I bounded past the charge. The brute stepped on the first rung. Torres mashed the remote. The staircase vanished in blinding orange. Metal screamed. The brute cartwheeled backward into a dead oak, the whole tree snapping under impact. It still tried to stand, one arm hanging by tendon threads. Singh emptied his last magazine into joint seams. Hanley lobbed a thermobaric grenade. The blast flattened grass in a 50-foot circle and turned everything inside to sizzling ruin. Silence, honest night sounds crept back. A cricket, a far owl. Falling ash dusted my sleeves while I stared at the blackened mound. No twitch, no breath. It was over. The extraction bird finally roared in at 2,304, guided by our emergency flare. Only 3 of us limped aboard. The crew chief asked what tore up our uniforms. I told him it was classified and left it there. I haven't filed the full report. They'd bury it anyway. The forest did its best to bury everything else. The fires burned out, the grass grew back, and the ridge stands quiet again. But I keep one fragment of that bone mask locked in my footlocker to remind me why orders matter, and why some science should stay in the lab under lock, far from the dark where it tries to breathe. This narrative, like many others, can also be found on Room 13. Story 4 in 2017. Deep within the collapsed Sierra Blanca mine outside Alto, New Mexico, the winch cable snapped midway down the abandoned shaft. I plunged into a nest of torn uniforms, gnawed radios, and something breathing behind me. Something that understood human gear well enough to arrange it like trophies in the dark. My name is Albert Reyes, and this is my account. We were 3 flown in at dawn, myself, Garcia, and Caldwell. Our cover story was inspecting old ventilation maps for the Forest Service, as Section Ops Gray never leaves a paper trail longer than a So, the locals just saw 3 guys in hard hats and took our word for it. We carried suppressed MP7 South, a satchel of fragmentation charges, and enough chem lights to outline our own graves. The briefing was blunt. People were vanishing inside the mine, and the entity responsible had survived 2 previous purges. Washington wanted it erased before tourist season. At the surface, the shaft looked ordinary, a rusted cage elevator, graffiti boasting of teenage courage, and the dry smell of pulverized rock. 40 feet down, the rock face changed color, a white quartz seam veined with something green and greasy. Our Geiger counter clicked an agitated tempo. Caldwell muttered that the readings didn't match any ore on record. Garcia laughed, saying, "Maybe the rock's allergic to us," and kept going. That was Garcia's way. Whistle past the graveyard, kick the gate open wider. We set glow sticks every 10 yards, navigating galleries lined with shattered ore carts. The silence felt manufactured, as if someone had pressed mute on the world. No bats, no dripping water, just our footfalls and the faint buzz of headlamps. I kept checking my safety. The switch felt smaller each time. 50 minutes in, we reached the first sign, the state police recovery team's helmets, arranged in a neat arc, headlamps still shining despite their batteries having died days ago. Their belts had been sliced off, buckles arranged in concentric circles. Garcia knelt, poked a buckle. "Symmetry freak," he said, trying humor again, but his voice fell flat. A splatter of dried red marked the wall, no drag marks, no footprints leading away. Just a vertical slash like paint flicked from a brush. Caldwell took pictures while his voice recorder logged edit beeps. The device jammed whenever he faced north. He frowned and pocketed it. The tunnel narrowed, timber braces forcing us into single file. That's where the PS10 audio sensors in my pack kicked off. Tiny pops spaced exactly 2 seconds apart, bouncing along the walls. Not clicks, not animal scratches, more like knuckles tapping sheet metal. The pattern skittered ahead, paused, repeated behind us. Caldwell's eyes widened. "It's mapping us," he whispered. We pushed on, sensors bleeding. Garcia tossed a flare forward. Its light caught something pale sliding out of view. Long, backward jointed arms, fingers webbed by a translucent membrane. No face, just 2 reflective pits where eyes should be, and bones shining blue beneath thin skin, like river stones under ice. It moved without sound, but the air after it passed smelled of cold copper and ammonia. Caldwell raised his weapon too late. The thing snatched him by the ankle and yanked him into side darkness before we could pull triggers. Our rounds tore splinters from the brace, sparks from rock, but Caldwell vanished. His scream cut short, not from impact, but like a gurgle pressed shut by a heavy hand. Garcia swore, switched to full auto. I ordered him off burst. Ammo mattered more than panic. We traded looks, but we kept moving. That's hunter doctrine. Follow, finish, retrieve. Past a collapsed stove, we entered an old magazine chamber, racks still holding dynamite sticks, sweating nitroglycerin. The tapping came again, clear as Morse code. Garcia whispered, "It's counting." And I couldn't argue. The sound got faster, then stopped. A metal disc sailed from the ceiling Caldwell's helmet visor, crushed inward. It clanged between us, lights sparking out. In that half-second of shock, the thing dropped, landing upright as if it weighed nothing. Up close, it stood taller than me by 2 heads, torso distended, ribs rippling under skin that seemed to float loose. No hair, no ears. The mouth was a vertical slit, flexing sideways, filled with stubby gray projections that ground together like millstones. Garcia hit it with a burst to the chest. The impact staggered it, but the rounds punched through wetly and lodged in the timbers. It swiped. Garcia's rifle flew. His shoulder shredded open. He screamed, stumbled back among the dynamite racks. I dragged him clear while unhooking to fragmentation charges from my vest. The thing advanced, head tilting as if weighing that new geometry. I primed the first charge and rolled it under a pallet. The blast tore the air, ripped shelves apart, and showered dust so thick our lamps turned into fog lights. When the haze thinned, the thing hunched but still moved, its left side dripping a milky fluid that hissed where it landed. It sniffed the air, or seemed to, then charged. I fired into its throat. The rounds punched in, and the slit mouth hiccuped sparks. It veered, slammed Garcia against the rock. I heard ribs pop. Garcia wheezed, pushed the barrel of his sidearm into the thing's abdomen, and emptied the magazine. It recoiled at last, retreating to the far end of the chamber, limping yet fast. Garcia slid down, choking. "Thermite," he said, eyes glassy. "Burn it out." I patched him quickly, pressure bandage. Morphine auto-injector, then rigged a thermite grenade on a collapsed rail cart, tilting the cart toward a funnel-shaped drift the thing had chosen for escape. I could hear it deeper in, tapping again, this time irregular, like breathing in code. It wasn't fleeing, it was luring. I pulled Garcia onto the cart, using a hand winch to inch us down. My headset crackled, surface command demanding a sit. I ignored them. I needed the channel clear for that tapping, because it told me range. 100 yards in, the drift widened into a natural cavern, its ceiling lost in shadow. Light from our lamps diffused off crystalline walls, throwing prisms everywhere. In the middle lay Caldwell, or what was left of him, arranged like a dissection diagram. Bones set beside organs, each piece laid flat on tops, ripped from our packs. It had studied him. It had studied us. The thing crouched beyond the tableau, one leg half gone from the thermite, bones shining through like ivory. It no longer tapped. It just breathed, chest slabs rising and falling. Its eyes, dark pits, were fixed on Garcia, perhaps sensing the ebb of his heartbeat. I spoke, my voice steady, because that's how you talk when fear runs out and duty remains. "Face me," it rose, taller now in the cavern's echo. I thumbed a thermite pin, flung the grenade low. It burst white. The heat lit its skin translucent, veins glowing orange like fire behind glass. It shrieked, a dry, high rasp that pushed dust off ledges. It didn't drop. It charged through the flame, skin curling, steps silent even while burning. I drew the last trick in my bag, an emergency magnesium rescue flare meant for signaling helicopters. I struck it, the white rod spitting 10,000 degrees, and rammed it into the slit mouth as it lunged. Its jaw clamped involuntarily, sealing the flare inside. Light blew from its eyes first, then from cracks in its skull. The cavern filled with a roaring hiss, ammonia thick enough to sting tears. When vision cleared, nothing stood except a lump of cooled slag fused to rock. Garcia lay quiet. I checked for a pulse, nothing. I closed his eyes, wrapped what I could in a foil blanket, and tagged the bundle for retrieval. Section Ops would list him Kia under training. His family would get a folded flag and no answers. Extraction was a blur, backtracking markers, coughing through smoke, climbing the service ladder because the elevator was toast. Surface Command met me with hazmat suits and too many questions. I handed over the helmet camera footage, filed the verbal report while they zipped out the shaft, and watched the sunset flame the desert red. They'll seal the entire hillside under concrete by next week. Tourists will take pictures beside a new historical plaque and never smell the copper that still coats my throat. By dusk, Command logged the tunnel as empty. But when I close my eyes, the silence keeps counting in the dark. This harrowing tale, among others, is featured on Room 13. Story 5 in 2019. In Ashdown, Arkansas, I ran through the Ironwood Grove, my service pistol empty, hearing Sergeant Miller scream behind me. The sound of bone snapping where the creature caught him told me that paperwork would be the least of my concerns that night. My name is Deputy Mark Callahan, and this is what happened. It began with a call at 1802 about an abandoned Buick idling on County Road 15, its hazard lights tapping a rhythm in the dusk. Ashdown has 2 deputies on nights, so Miller and I flipped a coin to see who would handle it. I lost. The Buick sat crooked on the shoulder, driver's side door open, radio still chattering 90s country. I stepped around empty takeout boxes and found the keys still in the ignition. The odor half swamp mud, half copper hit first. Then I saw drag marks leading into the woods. Phone signal dies a mile past the lumber mill, so I radioed Miller to roll back up. Miller arrived chewing sunflower seeds as if we had all night. Probably a stolen car, he said. File it and grab supper. But the drag marks bothered me. They cut straight between cedars, parallel lines, as if someone had been hauled by something with an even, strong stride. I clicked on my flashlight, exchanging the Buick's cabin light for shadows, and followed. 30 yards in, we found the first shoe, a white running flat, still warm, its heel crushed. Farther on, a strip of denim, freshly torn. Miller muttered, "If this is teens pulling a prank, I'm writing 30 tickets." We logged the items, photographed the path, and pressed on, sticks snapping under our boots. Ashdown's forest is a flat-bottomed floodplain, undergrowth thick with sawgrass and honeysuckle. You can usually hear armadillos shuffling by. Tonight the understory lay still as a photograph. At 1841, dispatch reported the Buick registered to Christine Vega, 28, address 1 town over. We tried her cell, got voicemail. The woods grew darker. I caught a faint thrum, almost mechanical, then realized it was breathing deep, slow, deliberate, taking through the trunks. Miller swung his mat. "Who's there?" "Sheriff's Department." Nothing. The breathing stopped as though someone had closed a valve. We found Vega at 1857. She lay on her back in a small clearing, eyes open, pupils blown, no blood around, only that copper smell, and 5 achingly thin punctures along her rib cage, evenly spaced, no tearing. I checked for a pulse, found none. Her phone was jammed into her mouth like a gag, screen still lit, camera app open. Whatever killed her staged the scene with patient hands. My own blood slowed. The air tasted metallic. Miller whispered, "Mark, look up." I did. 20 feet above, wedged between 2 branches, hung a second body, male, mid-30s, suit pants shredded at the knees, wrists bent backward until the palms